to have Dan Pontefract on. He is a best-selling author, a keynote speaker, a leadership strategist, and he's helping organizations around the world. The minute this pandemic dropped, and it made me think about him immediately, because he's been a leader in e-learning and online leadership development and communicating and rallying troops for decades. So Dan, when this first happened, and your business translated more to speaking engagements in the years past, what was your initial reaction?
Great question. Great to see you, Paige. Hello, Ruthie.
Hi.
I'm an educator like you, right? You know, we started out in education land, and so what does any good educator do? They pivot. You never know what's going to happen in a classroom. And so the skills that I learned in being an educator, a high school educator for 3 years, was, hey, what's coming in the classroom today is some foreign object, a kid who has no prefrontal cortex, whom is going to throw you something you've never experienced before. And that might be in the gym, that might be in the classroom, that might be in the hallway, but being an educator, you know, basically taught me how to be ready for anything in life. And the pandemic is just one of those more things, to be honest, Paige and Ruthie. I'm a writer. I got 4 books. I'm a speaker. I do about 50 keynotes a year around the world. And when the pandemic hit, it was like, oh, good. I got some time on my hands now. How can I help more? And that's kind of what ultimately happened. It was like, great. I don't have to travel probably for the next 6 months. That was my guess. In fact, Air Canada phoned me. Air Canada phoned me and said, sir, we know that you're like a 2 million miler. We know you travel a lot. Would you like to put all these flights on credit? And there were like 15 flights over the next 3 months. I was like, yes, I do. Yes, I do. Thank you very much. Anyway, long-winded way of saying, I think I'm malleable. I believe in a purpose statement that I came up with about 20 years ago, which is we're not here to see through each other. We're here to see each other through. And when I got grounded, if you will, I sort of did a couple things. I reached out to all the clients and said, hey, if you ever want to tackle some of those more consultative leadership development strategist type things, let's do this now. We've got time. But also with that kind of purpose statement, I said, okay, it's time to give back. And
what are those initiatives you're giving back?
Well, so as much as I'm kind of selfishly saying I'm an author and a speaker and I do a bunch of consulting for big companies and public organizations and how to be better companies or organizations, quite frankly, all of that came after I left being a K-12 educator for 3 years. I went into higher ed for 6 years. In fact, I was helping to run the downtown campus of BCIT. It was awesome. And then I moved on to the high-tech world. And for those in the Vancouver area, you'll know companies like Crystal Decisions, Business Objects, which became SAP. So I had a great 7-year run there as an executive. And then local headquarter company called TELUS literally phoned and said, hey, would you like to help us kind of fix our corporate culture? And I was like, you had me at hello. And so I spent 10 years at TELUS as its chief learning officer and chief envisioner, helping the organization shift its culture from essentially 50% employee engagement to just about 90. And I learned a lot, worked with great people, and then ultimately just decided to go on my own, Ruthie. So the point being is that when the pandemic hit, I mean, I would argue in a very un-Canadian way, I know what I'm doing when it comes to leading teams remotely and being a remote worker. You know, working out of a home office I've been doing it for 18 years out of SAP and at TELUS about half the time. Half the time I go into a building or travel around the world, half the time I work from home. And with that, I had teams ranging from 30 people to 300 people. And when you have them in, 9 different time zones, from, ANZ or Australia, New Zealand time zone through to the Pacific time zone and vice versa, you kind of pick up a few skills. So I put together a couple free toolkits, one for leaders. There's I think there's 20 videos, job aids, how-tos, articles, a free book I put out there for people, for leaders. to sort of understand that it's really important. These are the acts and actions you should take as a leader to be a remote leader. And then conversely, being a remote employee, for many, it's foreign. They have no idea what they're doing, right? They're like, but there's kids in the other room. Like, what do I do now, right? Am I supposed to do laundry? Am I allowed to do laundry at 2 p.m, right? There's all these kind of crazy questions. So I put together another toolkit, again, both of them for free, in hopes that people donate to the Red Cross, who I'm trying to support through this. And yeah, they're available, but they've been downloaded like 12,000 times now across the world. So, that's good. That's one of the things I did. Yeah.
Like, who reached out to you amidst all this that you were most surprised? Who was looking for support?
I don't kiss and tell, but I will say this, that there's been a few senior leaders in companies, public sector, so governments in Canada and elsewhere in the world, that have either seen me, read a book, maybe saw a talk, or even worked with me before, and they've kind of reached out and said, hey, can we use this, or can you help us here? And I've been delighted to, right? I mean, I'm pretty fortunate. I would say, well off. I make a great living, and as much as 9 keynotes canceled, money is one thing, right? I'm not moved by money. I'm moved by trying to help people, and somewhere around that, the boomerang will occur, and someone will hire me later on in life. I don't get worried and sucked into I must make money, otherwise I'm going to falter. I'm not. It'll come. So, Paige, I've been honestly surprised by some of the calls, but I've also just been humbled that someone thinks enough of what I can bring to the world to help their organization, their country, their team, or even their organization.
In terms of what do you think in terms of coming out of COVID-19? What do you think leadership? How do you think leadership will change, and what will it look like?
That is a phenomenal question. I wrote a book, again, sounds like I'm plugging something, called Flat Army. That was my first book, actually. And it was about how organizations, somewhat obviously, need to be 2 parts, right? Army, the word army actually comes from the Latin armada. And armada, as we know, is a flotilla. And a flotilla are a bunch of boats that are usually sailing together, to go from point A to point B. Each of those boats ultimately have a captain. And usually within an armada, there's a sort of a general captain. And so my point being is that what I would like to see come out of this is the recognition that although organizations will still ultimately need a hierarchy, you need people in charge to make decisions, and the buck stops somewhere. We can do it in a flatter way. We can do it in a more caring way, a more nurturing way, a more empathetic way. And I think that's what this is doing, to answer the question specifically. I think that I've been calling this the Great Reset. What's occurring is that men and women are looking in the mirror now and saying, well, Jesus, I mean, if Chris Martin is just playing guitar in his home for free for other people and doesn't care what he wears, maybe we could all do that. If the CEO of Bauer, and Paige will love this because it's a hockey reference, and I don't even really like hockey, but if the CEO of Bauer takes a look at himself and says, all right, we could shut down the lines and not make goalie masks, and poor Eli will never have another goalie mask for the life of him, but to retool the assembly line so that they can make protective headgear for nurses and healthcare workers. That's looking in the mirror and saying, what's my purpose? Why am I here? What's my company here for? And so that's what I'm kind of calling the Great Reset. I think so many men and women, particularly leaders now, are saying, oh yeah, right. The word human is in humanity. And maybe we are all the same. And so if anything that comes out of this, it's the Great Reset of why are we here and how might we instill a sense of community in the community in which we live.
There will be like almost a shift of half of the work life remaining like this now in the future, and half a little bit going back to meeting in a boardroom. How do you think?
Yeah. Well, Ruthie, put it this way. Like, so on Twitter, I was kidding around the other day, and I said something to the effect of, "What employee in their right mind is going to want to go back to a cubicle farm or an open office?" Then I sort of weighed, and I'm like, exactly, no one, right? No one. Now, that is to say cheekily that I think the Great Reset is also going to have to take a look at how we're operating inside the buildings. People need hugs and fist bumps and high fives. I mean, the next time I see Paige, it's going to be an HR violation how hard I'm going to hug her, right? It's not going to be. I don't care about Paul. I don't care because I miss Paige. Ruthie, I'll even give you one. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
You're not excluded here. I'm a hugger on hiatus, as I say in social media. But we are going to have to seriously take a look at the rigidity of what we're doing in our organizations, right? Does it have to be 8 to 5 every day? I'm going to say, no, we kind of proved that we could do this whole 180-degree turn and actually have people working from home. Now, let's not forget that, you've got 3.5 odd million people out of work, furloughed in this country of ours in Canada. So that's not without the respect that I'm trying to offer of those that are currently at home collecting CRB or whatever funding that we've got here in the country. It's tough. Like, there are lots of you have to go to work jobs, right? Like, that's where it happens. I don't get my haircut, but I know Denise, my better half, gets her haircut at a salon. Not like she can do that at home unless she wants me with the bad scissors. She can end up with a frizzy haircut worse than it is now. So there are jobs that have to be face-to-face and in buildings. But for those that are kind of like, if you want to call it the traditional kind of high-tech biz office worker type of stuff, I think we can do that much differently going forward. And that's part of the Great Reset.
That's awesome. And what would your silver lining be? Either business, family?
Inflammatory comments. One is, I would hope that out of all of this, the only reason to use Prime is for the videos and not for its 2-day, 1-day service. I think what we ought to look in the mirror about is how we support our communities. So whether you're in Kitsilano or Point Grey or wherever, are we out of convenience just signing up for Amazon Prime or something on the larger big companies that can ship something to you for 24 hours or less? Or should we be voting with our wallets and walking to the community to buy, that set of batteries or, the Tide detergent that you need for the laundry? Like, there's that, I think, that people will start to resonate with. I think that the investment in community more than anything is what's going to have given birth to the pandemic. That is, once COVID-19 leaves the room, I think a lot of people, me included, are going to look at ourselves and say, how might I support my community more than I've ever done before?
Right. Like a transition from globalization to more localization.
Yeah. And I think the localization will become the new globalization.
I like that.
We should wrap that, actually.
Top line on SpeakAid and tell everybody about it. I'm super excited about it.
SpeakAid. Well, it's an unfortunate name because afterwards I realized that there's a lot of people hard of hearing and they think that it's actually about hearing aids. It's not. It's like Live Aid, but without Bono. Put it that way. And although there's no music, I just called up 40 of my keynote authors, thinker friends around the world. And I said, hey, look, every conference imaginable has been canceled. Every training event has been postponed or canceled. So why don't we put our collective talents together? And starting April 20th at 8 a.m. Pacific, there are 40 speakers, 8 a day, 1 hour every hour, 8 a day for 5 days. And it's free, although, again, we're trying to raise some money for Red Crescent and Red Cross Society in their efforts to combat COVID-19. So, I've got Whitney Johnson and Mitch Joel and Michael Bungay-Stanier and Roger Martin and Rita McGrath and just all these kind of thinkers and authors and just awesome folks that have said, of course, Dan, let's do this. And the easiest way to kind of think about this and register is just go to speakaid2020.com. And there you'll be taken to a registration site, and hopefully, you get some learning out of this.